guys. So I'm just going to do a quick video on an audio book I listened to recently. It's a brand new Stephen King published book, come out this year, and it's Billy Summers. This is a book which I got on Audible straight away as soon as it was released, and it didn't disappoint whatsoever. So Stephen King, obviously wrote this, and this is read by Paul Sparks. It's roughly around 17 hours on the Audible audiobook, and it was a pretty good book, I must say. I've given it a pretty decent review as well. But just to give you a little bit of an insight and a short introduction into the book. So this book is effectively King's take on the last job, the sort of Ocean's 11 style one last job sort of cliche of books and movies, and it's told from the perspective of Billy Summers. Billy is an assassin for hire. He is more of like a bit of an unassuming, underestimated type of character in the book. He's put across as initially in the first few chapters, he's put across as he's deliberately trying to make out to his employers, organised crime, that he is not. He's got a few screws loose in the sense that he's not a very intelligent guy. Not to say that he's on the spectrum by any means, but in the sense that he's a little bit slow, very unassuming, easily led, but a crack shot and a brilliant marksman as well. We get to see a little bit of the backstory early on about being in the Marines and having tours of Iraq as well, particularly the firefight and the war in Fallujah as well, which he touches on later on in the book, which is quite important to the character. But it's quite clearly made out early on that Billy is not Billy Summers is his real name. However, the Billy Summers that is known by the organised crime, by the sort of the underworld, is he's a bit of a good kid, but a little bit slow, but he's a crack shot. And the sort of trope that goes into the book, sort of the theme about how Billy chooses his projects or his sort of his jobs, let's say, is that Billy will only target people who he deems as bad people. So the job this one last job within the book is in regards to another assassin by the name of Joel Allen, who had actually killed a child, and this was an unauthorized killing, an unauthorized hit. And Joel Allen, this other assassin, was being arrested and knew quite a lot of information on people in the criminal underworld and other financial backers who were the real drivers behind the assassins themselves. And effectively the job for Billy is to assassinate Joel Allen before he can sink to the fence, effectively, and come away with a bit of a plea deal, maybe not get the death penalty or 50 or 60 years in prison, maybe get that commuted down to 20 years in prison, 15, or even a witness protection program, depending on how much information he's willing to give up on organised crime. So one of the more interesting characters you meet early on in the book as well is Nick Magerian. I don't know, they didn't really describe what nationality he is, but I think that they were going more so down like the Eastern European, maybe even Albanian route. That Nick is Albanian, and he's more like a bit of he's described, and I saw him more of a sort of benevolent father, benevolent uncle type of these sort of mafia or underworld figures. I mean, by no means is he a nice person, but the way in which he interacts with Billy is very supportive, very reassuring. Having to explain a lot of things to Billy as well, because evidently believing that he's quite a slow guy. But Nick was a very, very interesting character, a big, heavy-set fella, and the job that was asked of Nick to set up the killing which was to give to Billy to assassinate Joel Allen, was paid for by a character by the name of Roger Clerk, who we don't really know an awful lot about until the very final end of the book. But this wealthy businessman is effectively the guy who's driving the assassination of Joel Allen. So we get into the actual task at hand. Billy describes getting set up in his new surroundings. He moves to a different city. His cover for the assassination is going to be pretty much him embedded for a couple of months, more so like an undercover writer, an author, and he's going to be positioned in a high what do they call it, like an eagle's nest, looking down on the courthouse. So there'll be a time where Joel Allen is transferred to this courthouse to be arraigned before the judge, where he will plead guilty or not guilty for the crimes which he's been remanded for. And until that time, Billy is there gathering intel, making his face known, so that on the day of the assassination, that there isn't any sort of obvious suspicion where you get the one person that everyone remembers because they've never seen him before in the building. He came in, did the job, and went. They want somebody. They wanted somebody embedded in there, somebody that they could trust, that they could take their time to set up the shot, and make sure then that person, then that fake alias, whose name is David Lockridge. So Billy Summers becomes David Lockridge, an unassuming, understated author who's working up in a quite a high office block, looking down on the courthouse, ready for the day. And he's going to get a phone call or a text message, as it ends up being in the book, to say the package is on its way, or the book has been ordered, meaning that Joel Allen is going to be on his way, and then they can shoot him. But a lot of the interesting parts of the book is how, as the David Lockridge character, Billy Summers, he had a couple of rules where he'd worked undercover similarly before, where he tried not to get involved in any sort of physical relationships with women, or get too attached to, say, kids or neighbours, or try not to get too involved and become too obvious, and maybe stick out like a sore thumb, maybe, even if that was kind of the point, was to get himself known to a point, but not overly as much. But unfortunately, Billy kind of breaks all of his rules. He becomes very, very friendly with the next door neighbours and their kids. They play a lot of board games as well, a lot of Monopoly, and he invites a lot of kids around to go and play Monopoly with him. He gets on pretty well with his neighbour and the neighbour's wife as well. With cooking, and I think he does really enjoy being that David Lockridge character I think part of him was hoping to a certain degree that the job itself, which he was going to get paid $2 million for the hit, and he only gets paid, I think, $500,000 up front for the prep work, that he was hoping that it would not come through, and maybe that he could take the $500,000 and just stay as he was. But in particular, there's a girl working in the building, an accounting firm that's working in the same office block as him, that he takes a liking to, and he has relationships with her. And while it's nothing really going to be long term there, I think he does take a little bit of a shine to her. And what comes across in the book is that Billy is a very, very perceptive and intelligent person who is able to use disguises, tones of his voice, certain words and certain phrases, in order to sort of frame how his sort of mental state is, his mental capacity as well. He's a very, very clever character, and for all sort of imagination purposes, I did think that the one person would be fantastic to play Billy Summers in a movie would be somebody like Jake Gyllenhaal, because I think that, looking at particularly a couple of films that he's been in, like in Nightcrawler, the recent Spider-Man movie, Prisoners as well, he plays somebody with a lot of tension and a lot of stress very, very well, but also he's got that way in which he can switch in between, you know, dumb to sensible to serious to believably deceptive as well. So I think that'd be a good shout if they do make a Billy Summers movie as well. So, anyways, in the meantime of being David Lockridge, this is where if you're not paying attention to the book and listening, with a lot of sort of regularity, you could get sort of mixed up. But there comes in now a third alias. So you've got Billy Summers, which is Billy, the normal guy, the assassin. You've got David Lockridge, which is the undercover author, working in the office block about going to kill the target. Now the third alias who comes in is Billy's safety alias. Effectively, that if he ever gets fucked or double-crossed by the mob or by undercover or anybody like that, that he's able to use this third alias as a bit of a backup failsafe to then go and use bank accounts, safe houses, and travel freely with fake passports and the like, basically to try and avoid, getting double-crossed. Not that he had any reason to, but he does suspect that as this is his last job, that not all last jobs go to plan, and something always happens, so as these cliches demonstrate. So the Dalton Smith character, this is the third alias, and Dalton Smith links him with a guy called Bucky, who is effectively Billy's accountant and his sort of confidant, in the sense that he is part of this sort of fail-safe mechanism. If Billy ever needs to cut and run and leave the Billy Summers alias, Billy Summers part of his life away and live now as Dalton Smith. So what happens is we get to the crunch part of the book, roughly around 40% in, and there's a lot of build-up, there's a lot of relationships, a lot of perception going on. I think at this point King is really filling in the background of the book, and you get a better picture about who he is, Billy Summers. So Joel Allen turns up at the courthouse. Billy is there in the high-rise building. He's agonising over the fact that David Lockridge part of his life is going to be terminated and is going to be he is going to let an awful lot of people down, because they will know that he doesn't come back to his safe house next door to his friends. He doesn't ever come back to the office in which he's working in. The shot would have come from the office, so it would be obvious that that's where it's come from as well. But before this happens, Billy is sure that he's going to get double-crossed. So he's sure that Nick Magerian, the undercover boss, is going to double-cross him. Nick had never asked Billy before to go along with a pre-approved escape route or an escape plan with Nick's own sort of henchmen, his own sort of capos in the mafia. So Billy suspects something's going to go on here. Maybe he's going to be driven out to the desert and they're going to put 2 bullets in the back of his brain and bury him in a shallow grave there. And that's good. And then all roads that lead back to Nick and to this Roger Clerk business character who's a sanctioned hit is going to be gone. And he's quite right, he suspects that, because there's a lot of suspicion going on, making sure that he's on board with the plan as well. So Billy turns up on the day, takes in a lot of information. He does come across another character who's quite fucking annoying, and I can't remember his name now, but there's another character who is really getting under Billy's skin. He's a bit of a weasel sort of business guy. He's put across as like a bit of a MAGA idiot, really, but this guy is the one who owns the office block where the shot is going to take place. And this guy's in a lot of debt to the undercover mafia, and as part of his writing off of some of his debt is that the mafia using the high-rise, so the office block which Billy works in, to do the assassination. So this character had given prior information to Billy that there was going to be a bit of a distraction on the day of the assassination. Now, Billy couldn't confirm this either way, from any sources about whether this was the actual plan. So immediately there was conflicting information about what sort of what the escape was going to be. How were they going to all extricate themselves from the assassination? It comes to it, and Billy kills Joel Allen. Joel comes out of the back of the from the back of the sheriff's um, police vehicle, and Billy shoots him through the face, and that's it. He's dead. So Joel Allen is dead. Dead men tell no tales, and that part is wrapped up. So Billy escapes, and Billy, as the Dalton Smith third alias, the failsafe alias, had rented a basement apartment a couple of blocks down from where he was working in the city. So his idea was that instead of getting in a car and running immediately away from the scene of the crime where he could be stopped at roadblocks and identified and then turned back and arrested, he chooses to stay within the city, but in a very inconspicuous place, which is a basement apartment. And he stays there for quite some time. He's sort of mulling around. I mean, whilst he's been doing all of this sort of undercover, you know, being embedded within the community and being embedded within his alter egos, he's been writing a book as the author. I mean, everything Stephen King comes through as an author, so he's been writing his book, which is effectively his autobiography, his life, and he continues that as the Dalton Smith character, and he starts to take it a bit more serious as he keeps on going on. Now, one night, as part of the Dalton Smith character being undercover, he hears a huge bang outside the window of his basement apartment, and outside you can see that there's a big sort of frat boy van that has dumped out a young girl on the side of the pavement, and the girl's in a pretty bad shape. Looks like she's been physically abused. She's been drugged, and we later find out that the character, which is I thought she's a fantastic character, which is Alice Maxwell, and she's a really strong character and a really believably, charming, sweet character who has got quite a lot of edge, steel, and a realism to her, and that sort of sense of trust and newfound adventure. I thought that this was one of the best parts of the book, was the way in which King sort of developed that trust between Billy, who was by nature a deceptive person, a liar, living in his third alter ego, who had gone out into the street and taken Alice Maxwell into his, and sort of, he could have left her out there to die, but he still would have been undercover and he would have been fine, and he would have got away with the assassination, and he wouldn't have blown his cover. But he takes that risk to go and bring her back into the underground apartment. He does. He cleans her up to a certain degree, but it's obvious that immediately by bringing her back in and seeing the bruises and the attack on her, that she's been raped. I can't say the R word on YouTube, so I'll say sexually assaulted in the most extreme sense, if you catch my drift. And it's three sort of frat boys. One is a kind of boyfriend that she was into, and they've obviously taken advantage of her when they've invited her over. So she's kind of trying to get used to Billy. Billy's sort of trying to not take advantage. Well, he's not taking advantage in any sense of the way, but it's a bit of a quandary. He comes in immediately, where he saved her out of the goodness of his heart. However, he can't immediately allow her to leave. So in a sense, he's kind of kidnapped her, in the sense that for her own good, he's saved her. He's got her back to a bit of some sort of health, but it's not as if she's allowed to immediately leave, go back to college, or even contact her family, because his cover will be blown. And there is a bit of a sort of a bit of a dance that goes around with them, in the sense that she thinks he's thinking, oh, is she going to fuck me over? Is she going to be back when I go out to go get some groceries? And she's thinking, should I just leave? Should I take the knife? that he's left on the top of the cabinet, stab him, call the police, and go. But like I say, one of the best parts of the book is that trust that develops between the two characters, which I found, quite, quite astounding, really, about how sort of easy that, and it's a very uneasy topic, particularly with what had happened to this female character, about how that she took to him, that he took to her. It was entirely platonic. That is not a love story in a sense. Billy does touch on in the book that his first kill was actually his stepfather, or his mother's boyfriend, who had actually killed his sister in front of him. And he does sort of see this Alice Maxwell character as sort of a younger sister, and that does come through in the sense that he could save Alice Maxwell. He never saved his sister, who was beaten to death in front of him before Billy killed his mother's boyfriend. So it is a little bit of a redemption arc for Billy as well. And, what happens is that Billy soon discovers that he's getting fucked out of the money. So he's not getting the $2 million. He's got the $500,000 up front for the killing, but it's all quiet on Nick Magerian's side of things. Pretty much because they were probably not going to. They had no intention of paying Billy the other $1.5 million, and his assumption that they were going to kill him in the desert, or kill him outside in some sort of double cross, proved true. The guy I mentioned earlier, the annoying fuck, who owned the office block which Billy assassinated Joel Allen in, he ends up getting a couple of shots to the head in near an industrial site, so he ends up getting killed. There is an attempt on, I think it's Paulie, who is the go-between between Nick Magerian and Billy Summers. Billy gets angry that he's getting shafted out of the money, so through using Bucky as accountant, or his bit of a source gatherer as well, he decides to go and pretty much exact revenge on Nick Magerian, the mob boss who would set him up and put him to the job first of all. So what develops is the relationship with Alice and with Billy. Alice decides to come along with him and to meet Bucky and to set up the attack on Nick. I thought that the sort of attack on the compound, Nick's compound, and the mob sort of people within there, the capos and the other sort of lower level soldiers, was excellent. I thought it was something you could see it kind of like one of those 80s Schwarzenegger films where, like Commando, where he's attacking a bit of a safely secured, what you think is a safely secured base, and he's blowing away, and he's going in and he's assassinating people, breaking necks, he's stabbing people in the neck, he's shooting people, silencing people, and he's knocking them out and putting them in. So he's quite good the way in which he describes going through the house and eventually getting to Nick. But the one character he comes across first of all is kind of like an older lady in the garden, and she's not as old or as sweet as she's not as she seems. Billy comes in there in a bit of a disguise as like a bit of a Hispanic gardener, and he's got a package that he needs to deliver to the big house. So he's gone through the initial checkpoint gate where this Marge woman, who is part of the mafia family, is there questioning him, talking to him like shit because she thinks he's just one of the hired help, and Billy's cover kind of gets blown there, and he has to sort of fight it out with her, and he leaves her alive. He just cracks her on the head with the sort of pistol whips her, and he's on up to the house then to take care of each soldier at the time then in the house. And yeah, it was superb. He gets to Nick Magerian. He does not kill Nick, which I thought he would have. Instead, he wants to exact the truth about why was he double crossed, why was he treated this way after everything that he did for, albeit bad people, for the mafia? Why did they double cross him? He was never gonna, sing like a bird like Joel Allen was going to do, the person who did get killed. So he wanted to pretty much find out the truth from him, and it's explained to him that part of the hit itself, the stipulation from Billy, was that all loose ends were going to get tied up, which Billy suspected. And the person who's been driving this is the money man, which is Roger Clerk. Now, the Roger Clerk character, it doesn't really figure too much at all, in the book itself. He is sort of like that sort of looming figure towards the end of the book. He's the money man. He is the driver of the events of this sort of last job. So Billy says, he's going to leave Nick alive, but he would come back and kill him if he did get double crossed again. So effectively, Billy says, "Listen, you're gonna send me the money that you owe me," and Billy plans to leave the money then for Alice Maxwell. If things were to go wrong, and if he doesn't manage to come away from Roger Clerk's without alive. So he meets up with Bucky. He leaves the compound. He meets up with Bucky, his friend. Bucky, him in itself, is not to be trusted either, but he's nowhere near as ingrained as in the mafia sense as like Nick Magerian and Roger Clerk. But he still is not to be trusted. Alice Maxwell takes a liking to Bucky, and they hit it off quite well. What I did like was the connection to the prior Stephen King books, which is The Shining and Doctor Sleep. So they talk about the Overlook Hotel being burned down, and that is just pretty much in I think it's Nevada, isn't it, where they are, and where Bucky lives is quite near to the Overlook Hotel. So I did like that little touch, Stephen King putting that in, just little things about, they say it was haunted and whatnot as well. So that was quite good. Effectively, Alice and Billy decide to go to the Roger Clerk house. Roger Clerk there is guarded by some pretty formidable, security person types, ex-special forces, but Billy is determined. Billy gets by those, and he ends up, putting a couple into Roger Clerk. But part of the motivation for doing this is that Roger Clerk was actually being blackmailed by his own son, who was upset that he was being overlooked for the sort of inheritance to the family business, the family fortune, let's say. And the father, Roger Clerk, was involved with some really dodgy, underage predilections with activity with children, let's say. And knowing that and having proof that was what was going on, initially Roger Clerk decided to give in to his son's blackmail and hand him over the company on his death. But what had happened then is that the hit by Joel Allen on his son was green lighted, and Roger then, for a guy who kills his own son and molests underage children, this is a really sick, disgusting character, arrogant, feeble, but just completely and utterly morally bankrupt in the really short time you get to see him in the book. And I think that, when it does come to the fact that Billy does put him away, that it is a bit of a punch in the air moment, because it's a horrible character and a horrible person, that is the type of epitome that Billy, effectively looks to kill, and those types of assignments that he does have to make sure that he's not just killing, people that are good people, but they're just, being disagreed with by somebody. He likes to think that he's killing genuinely bad people. After that, they go to leave the property, Alice and and Billy, and unfortunately, hiding ready in wait for Billy is Marge, the crazy sort of crazy woman who was at the original gatehouse that Billy pistol whipped at the Nick Magerian's place, and she does shoot Billy. Now this is where the book takes two different turns. I think you get the Hollywood type of ending, which I think that, you know, if they decide to go with it, I wouldn't be too disappointed. Which was Alice picks up the writing of Billy Summers' story when she actually gets back from the Roger Clerk killing, um, and so she is explaining to Bucky the sort of the Hollywood ending in which, Billy recovers from the gunshot wound and is able to sort of fight his way back, and that's that. Before rudely interrupted, and um, Alice then recounts the true version in which Billy unfortunately slowly sort of succumbs to the debilitating gunshot wound into the stomach, the loss of blood, the sort of the loss of mobility, the slow sort of creep of death and loss of appetite and so forth in him. And he decides not to hold back Alice Maxwell, um, and sets everything up financially as well, that he's going to be able to support her after he dies as well. So it depends. I suppose you've got this dual ending there, which, I suppose you could take away which one you prefer, either or. But it is a bit of a redemption story. The guy who, said he was going to kill people because they were bad people, in his own words. I mean, he does sort of come to the realization that himself, he is a bad person because he does take life from these people himself as well. And it is a bit of a redemption arc, particularly in the sense of he could never save his sister from being killed, but yet he's able to save Alice Maxwell, set it up for the future as well, pretty well. So, yeah, I just thought, overall, though, I know I've gone on a little bit about this video, but I thought this was a sensational book, absolutely brilliant. And the last few books that he's done, such as Later, The Outsider, a lot of other books that he's done, particularly over the last 4 or 5 years, I think he's actually getting better. He's got I would say, not a second wind. I think he's got like a bit of a third wind, but he is the master of horror. But I thought this one was unbelievable. I thought it was such a good take on the last job sort of cliche. And overall, I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. I mean, you can get it on Amazon. I've got the screen up here. So you've got the Kindle version is $10.99. Audible. I mean, if you do subscribe to Audible, you could get that either for $7.99 or get that as your credit. But the hardcover price is pretty good. You can actually get it in store at the moment at different supermarkets for around £10, or I've seen it as much as low as £8 as well in the UK. So that's pretty good. It's well worth the investment as well. I thought it was an absolutely superb book, and overall I'm going to give this Billy Summers 4.5 stars out of 5. I was very, very impressed with it. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll put a link below for the book itself as well, and let me know what you thought of the book, and give me a subscribe if you can, and a like of the video, just to let me know how you